Hello and welcome to Eddie V Live. I am your host, Eddie V. I am he. And we are in Friday of the Octave. Friday of the Octave 2026. Life is flying by. I am getting so old and decrepit, but it's going to be a good show tonight. It's going to be great. I'm looking at myself right now and I need someone to save me from myself because this lighting thing is I feel like it's so bad. I feel like it's just like, I don't even know. I need someone to help me. Someone save me. Someone who knows lighting, save me. Save me from myself. But no, we got a good show tonight. It's going to be an amazing. I keep failing. I copied Nick Fuentes with that. I got to come up with my own intro. But it's going to be a great show tonight. Tonight's Fun Friday. It's not a real thing, but I'm going to start it. But today when I was thinking about the show, what to talk about. And I think I really want to talk about the schizos, the schismatics. And they're not going to like that if they ever watch this show, which maybe not. But who am I talking about? The SSPX, the Seeds, the Sedevacantists, all those cats, because I think they're just Protestant. I don't know why they get a pass to not be Protestant. I guess they're not technically a part of the Protestant Revolt or anything like that, or the Revolution, if you're a little if you're a little spicy with your history. It's actually a revolution. It's a rebellion. No, but the Protestants, they are who they are, and it's not great. It's not great for sure. But I don't like the esteem that the SSPX and the Seeds get just because they're traditionalists or whatever. So I want to rail on them a little bit tonight. And it's kind of nuanced. So if you don't know who are the SSPX, who are the Sedevacantists, and there's other groups. There's the Society of St. Paul V too. So I guess that'd be SSPV. And there's other ones, the Old Catholics. I don't know the whole history of all the schismatic movements in the church. I'm sorry about that, but there has been a lot. And the modern ones are just, I guess, I don't even know if they're trickier or not. They're just current. And yeah, so the SSPX is a Society of St. Pius V. There's a whole history. There's a couple of videos and books that go through kind of the autistic version where they just break down everything. I don't really think you need to do that because some people you need to, and I'm getting into stuff before explaining it. But Archbishop Lefebvre, which his name doesn't look like it's pronounced that way, which is, it's French. So I guess it doesn't have to. It's just really funny. It looks like Lefebvre, but it's Lefebvre. Anyway, I gotta stop getting sidetracked. But he started this. I forgot what they call it. It's not like an order or anything. It's like some sort of lay apostolate or something along those lines. And he started this whole thing. But basically, I would argue that they're schismatic. Other people say, it's not nice to call them schismatic. And I know the church, like John Paul II, literally excommunicated, the four. And I'm getting into the history again. They were schismatic. I think they're still schismatic. Some people don't like you saying that. That's what I'll say, and you can decide for yourself, I guess. But you have them who are still around, and it's crazy because I love the Latin Mass. I am not, I don't enjoy should I say that? I don't enjoy the Novus Ordo. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I don't think it's blasphemous or anything. It's valid. So I go on Latin Mass Finder and I look up, where they are, wherever I am. And half of them got to be these SSPX chapels. It's crazy. And I don't like that they're put on there, but whoever made the sites, they're probably fans of the SSPX because they got this weird position. I don't even think it's weird, but we can talk about it. And then you got the Seeds or the Sedevacantists, which just means empty chair. They don't think there's been a valid pope. And there's so many different groups of them. I don't even know. We have one by us, and I don't even know where they fall, who they think the last real pope was. But they basically think whoever the real pope is now, they do not think that they're the pope. They're so screwed. It's not even funny. I don't know how they're going to get back to anything and what their pathway forward is. And then you have the SSPX is a little not as screwed, but still screwed. But I want to talk about them because I feel like there's just a lot of nuance that is just needed, and I'm not going to do it. I'm probably going to skip over everything But I do want to talk about it. I want to, make some people a little bit peeved, and hopefully they'll attack me, and then I can actually address something. Because I don't know. I don't like to like. I don't want to break down the whole thing unless someone needs me to break it down. So it's almost like G.K. Chesterton saying like, I think he wrote Orthodoxy literally because someone was like, "What do you believe?" And he's like, "Okay, now that you asked me, I will write this book." And that's how I feel about things. I work best under pressure. It's like someone's getting at me. But I would just say that the seeds and the SSPX are just Protestants. And what do I mean by that? So it's weird. The Protestants, there's a lot of different Protestants, but a general thing that people put on them as a label is like this kind of sola scriptura, you're your own authority. It all stems back to authority, really. That's the funny thing. When you go through all this stuff, like what is it really after? It's after authority. Even the feminine, and at risk of getting off track here, even the feminist is it's about authority. It's always about authority. The fall, maybe that's. I mean, you can make the argument the fall is also about authority. Usurping right authority. But anyway, with the what was I talking about? With the Protestants, they're trying to usurp the Pope's authority mainly, and then I would say kind of related to that is the authority of the whole church as it's hierarchically spread, including like monastic orders in terms of their temporal and their spiritual authority, and the clergy in general in terms of their temporal and spiritual authority. I will say, there's a lot of abuse when the Protestants were doing that, but then it's this. So there's a lot of abuse happening from the clergy at the time of the Revolution, Reformation in the 16th century. And so that's their excuse to be like, well, we need to rail against this authority. And then eventually they come up with their own authorities, right? And I would say that's the same thing that the SSPX and the seeds do nowadays, and whatever XYZ. It's almost like LGBTQ, but like all these different schismatic groups, whatever they're saying. So what are they saying? So the Protestants are saying corruption, blah, blah, blah. We eventually come up with our own authority, which is usually scripture. Sometimes they got some hierarchy in there, but the hierarchy never really has true authority from what it appears to me. And then you fast forward to nowadays, then you have the SSPX. Generally, the SSPX and these other schismatic movements are saying like the either Vatican II itself is corrupt and all that jazz, or the spirit of Vatican II, the things that happened after it because of it or tangentially to it are corrupt. So they need to basically disobey proper authority and almost establish their own authority. The weird thing with the SSPX is that they always say this thing where like we still think the Pope is the real Pope. We just don't listen to him unless we want to listen to him, unless he's fulfilling our thoughts, our trusted opinions on how to interpret tradition, I guess. It's a little ridiculous, honestly. I feel a little rude saying that, but like I don't even feel like giving them like a lot of leniency or credit with their position, because it is just not very not very solid. So I think that's the same thing. So the SSPX is they're saying, oh yeah, we don't like what Vatican II said, or we don't like the new mass, the Novus Ordo Missal. So we're just going to do whatever we want. And then they'll do whatever. We're going to do what we know is right, which is like, so you're the authority, I guess, on what is right and wrong. And then it gets even worse with the other schismatics. So I'm like, first of all, where does that authority come from? And they'll do this thing, and I hear this a lot, where they'll be like, I'm not a papal maximalist. They'll throw out this word, and when I hear that word now, I remember when I was first learning about this stuff, and I love the Latin Mass, so obviously I was probably like a prime target, and still maybe am a prime target for them, to get me to the dark side or something like that. And so I forgot what I was going with that. I like the Latin Mass, so I was a prime target. I remember learning about this originally, and them talking about like I would hear this word papal maximalism, all this stuff, hyper papalism, and it's basically them in an interesting way trying to dumb down or dilute the authority of the papacy. And and I think that's just a very they really want to keep this traditional thing because they're very much about, in theory, about tradition. And if you are about tradition, which the Protestants they aren't, so they get away. They're really not about tradition, and I don't even think they'd claim that. Most of them don't even know history, so it's really hard for them to say they're traditionalists or about tradition. But with the SSPX, they have to acknowledge that there is a tradition of listening to the Pope or the Pope being the head of the church. So they're trying to split this line where it's like there is authority in the papacy, but it's not what you think it is. And then what papal authority is apparently for them is just basically whatever they think it is. And you're like, where do you get that authority to say? You get to decide what the papal authority is? Do you see how this like goes back and forth? It's like they're trying to deny certain rights of the Pope, certain powers of the Pope, and then they magically give themselves those powers. And I've read the Vatican I documents on this, which it's crazy because literally the response I've gotten from people, like when I refer an SSPX or a seed to Vatican I, because they're usually about the Vatican II. They're usually about the Vatican II not being legit. But then you take it back one council of the Vatican I, and they'll do this crazy thing. This is what I've literally heard. They'll say, John Henry Newman actually didn't think that they should have done Vatican I. It's like, what does that even mean? I love John. He's a saint. John Henry Newman is great. But so because he's not even saying that Vatican I's wrong, right? He's just saying, and I think this is a legit quote from him. He's just saying it's not the right time to do Vatican I. But they did it. Like Pius IX is the Pope. John Henry Newman is not the Pope, and he did it. So what does that have to do with anything? And they'll really stick on this, and you push them on it, and they won't go any further, which I'm assuming for their position, they have to dumb down what Vatican I is saying somehow, because Vatican I is very clear. The Pope basically just reigns over the church. There's no way around it. So that's one side. That's one aspect. And then I want to get into the other side, which what is Vatican I saying? What does the church tradition say? It's not saying like the Pope does have authority over these things. Can the Pope make a new missal? Yes, he can. That has happened before. Can he make changes to the missals that exist? Yes, he can, and it has happened before. Like it's funny, and someone I was talking to about it, they mentioned this too. The missal of, oh man, I'm gonna get the date wrong. 1962, 1960. It's one of those two. I think it's 1962 from Pope John the 23rd is usually the missal that is used by SSPX and even the FSSP and Institute of Christ the King, who are in good communion, not the SSPX, but those two are. This missal is not like the straight up missal from the Council of Trent. It's just not. There have been changes to it. So did the popes have the right to make those changes? Did Pius V have the right to codify the original Tridentine missal? Did they or did they not? And it doesn't even, we're not even saying, because they'll be like, well, the new change was bad, was good, was lame, was not reverent. And it's like, that could be true. Did Christ promise that the popes would make changes to the liturgy and it would always be the most reverent thing ever? It's like, no, that's not, I don't know. That never was a thing. Can they put forward a missal that is not very beautiful or doesn't have really good prayers and stuff like that? I don't see any protection against that. And the Vatican I documents goes through very clearly what the protections of the papacy are, which were already understood before. Maybe it wasn't understood specifically with like extraordinary, ordinary magisterium, all that stuff, which I'm not going to get into unless someone presses me on it. Someone presses me. But it goes through pretty clearly like what the Pope is defended on or protected from error in terms of his authority. So like when the Pope, like, they'll say, so that's another aspect. And then I'll go into discipline. They'll say like, oh, the Pope persecuted this or that bishop or priest. It's like, did Christ say that he was going to protect Peter from perfectly disciplining people all the time? It's like, you're going to have to show me in the tradition. In what council did they say that? You know what I mean? It's a little ridiculous at this point. And, there's they dodge a little bit. They dive and dodge, which, they have to. They have a position. And if they want to prove it, they're going to have to dodge these very straightforward, honest questions. I'm sympathetic to them. There's one more category I want to go through, but I'll first say I'm sympathetic to them. I want to say that. So if they're watching, I'm sympathetic to you. I love the Latin Mass, but the Latin Mass is not worth schism. That is just not worth it. And it's even crazier because I know, the Traditionis Custodes was pretty hardcore from Pope Francis, but there's still Latin Masses. So it's not like it's gone. Maybe if it was wiped out, I'd be even more sympathetic, but I would still be like, don't be a schismatic, for sure. The last thing I want to go through with these people is they'll do an ad hominem attack on popes. And this ranges a lot. So one of the ones I heard, actually Tim Gordon has a video, I think it came out today or yesterday, talking about Pope Paul VI. I've only watched a little bit of it because I wanted to get live here. But I'm assuming he's going to talk about like, how crazy Paul VI was, if that's true or not. I don't know if it's true. But I've had multiple people at this point. Yeah. They'll use, this is their biggest move right here for SSPX seeds, whatever, is they'll be like, well, check out these individual popes since Vatican II and how evil they are and all the terrible things they did and how cowardly they are and all this stuff. And they'll use that as like, oh, now we have to rebel because they're terrible people. And I'm like, I literally don't see the correlation. There have been terrible popes before, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, they're terrible popes, so now like they have zero authority at all. And they'll do those complicated things where they'll be like, Robert Bellarmine talked about if the Pope was a heretic. This is a different thing, but heresy and moral uprightness are different things. Related in a little bit of way, I would guess, because heresy would be an immoral thing, but I digress. They'll be like, because this Pope was a heretic, there's actually a way where the church itself could judge a Pope. This is all theoretical. I don't even think that's possible, really, because the Pope rules over the whole church. I think that's just cope, I think. But they theoretically, some theologians think that the council could judge a Pope. And not a council, the church could judge a Pope, which I guess would mean like all the bishops. I don't even know how that, like a democratic vote or something, which I think is so gay. I can't stand that. So what is going on here? You basically have the new Protestants. People can't stand tough times. They can't stand authority, so they have to usurp it. They have to usurp. Do I want to get into the? No, I'm not going to get to the other thing. It's all about usurping authority. It's all about pride. It's all about I want what I want, when I want it, as I want it. And you just can't, if you want to be like the will of God being the numero uno, Jesus Christ being the numero uno, you are going to have authority over you. You are going to have hierarchy over you. There's just no way around it. So there's a certain point where we have to accept that. And it doesn't mean we don't fight for what we believe is right. If, in theory, if the Pope does unjustly persecute a clergyman or a layperson or something, we need to fight that in all the capacities that we can and try to convince the Pope, like, hey, you did a wrong thing here. Or, bishop or priest or whoever's doing the wrong thing. But where they actually have proper authority, you still need to obey. And this is in all aspects of authority. Know the proper scope of the authority and obey in that, and then disobey outside of that scope. Like a big example that people are always saying, because I'm always talking about husbands have authority over their wives. That is church teaching. That is traditional traditional church teaching. And even the modern popes have talked about it in a very nice, fluffy way. But husbands have authority over their wives. There's obviously ranges where that authority stands. So if the husband commands the wife to commit a sin, she does not have to obey, obviously, and there's other aspects too. So know those things, but the popes, and if you want to show me in the church teaching where this is not true, the popes have the authority over the liturgy. So there's just no way to get around that. And then I do want to talk about like the history of like the Tridentine Mass or like the Roman Rite or Latin Rite Mass a little bit, because I'm really curious, because this is what I do with Protestants. When I'm talking to Protestants, I'll be like, what were they doing before Scripture was even written? Because in 33 AD, they didn't have the Gospel of John. They didn't have any of the New Testament. So what was their authority going to be? And usually they'll say like, well, it was the apostles then, and then when they die it becomes Scripture. It's like, okay, sure. And I guess I should answer that. So the next thing would be like, well, how do we know which Scriptures are correct? And then usually they'll say, oh, what the church has always believed is. And then I'm like, who is the church? who is the church? How do we find her? And they'll usually just say, whatever people they like, which usually goes to St. Augustine, but then he talks about stuff they don't like. So except for the stuff they don't like, I've literally talked to a Protestant where she was reading Justin Martyr, but she was reading like like not a full version, like for a class. And I showed her the full version and she refused to read it because it wouldn't fit her narrative. Anyway, so that's what I do with Protestants. So the same thing I would do with traditionalists or schismatics is, where does the Mass come from? Were they celebrating a Latin Mass, a Tridentine Mass in the 1st century in Jerusalem? And I'll just leave that open-ended question. Well, were they even doing the Mass in Latin? Who gets to decide it's not in Latin anymore? Or I mean, it's not in whatever language they're doing: Greek, Aramaic, Hebrew. Do we even know the first language? Are they doing the exact same stuff? Because when you read Justin Martyr, I'm not say what you want, but it sounds a lot like the stripped down of Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr just does like a very basic step-by-step thing. I'm like, that could be a Tridentine, or it could be a Novus Ordo, or it could be a Divine Liturgy at this point. They don't mention singing. At least I don't remember mentioning singing. So maybe it's not Divine Liturgy. But even the Divine Liturgy, it's written by, I believe, I don't really know the Eastern history as much, but St. John Chrysostom. So it's like before that, people would be like, well, they were already doing it. It's like, were they doing it? Why do they call it St. John Chrysostom's liturgy if he had to make stuff up to be a part of that liturgy? Did he just refine it? Who is he to refine it? Why does he get to do that? Who has the authority on these things? Is it the SSPX? Is it random priests that get to just do whatever they want? And don't get me wrong, I can't, the Novus Ordo, it hurts me. And all these innovations, I would say the same thing. Well, the Novus Ordo probably allows for it. It's actually really confusing because you have the 1970 missal, and then like you have different missals from that, and then like the USCCB has like their own thing from that. It's very complicated. But that's what I was asked to traditionalists is like, all right, do you think the Mass was the same in the 1st century? Yes or no? And if they say yes, I'd be like, how do you know that? How do you possibly know that? And then secondly, I would walk it down the line like, well, if it did change from then, who has the authority to change it? Even if it's organic, because they'll always bring up this organic thing. Well, it's organic development. It's organic. Makes me hungry, kind of. Organic tomatoes. It's an organic tree, an apple tree. But if it is organic, who gets to decide that the organic stuff's okay or not? Riddle me that. So yeah, I get a little, not frustrated. I don't get my cortisol up. Don't get me twisted. But it is like where I get the point. I'm like, you just don't. I don't even know if you want the truth at this point. But if you are a seed or if you are an SSPX, I'm open to talking about it. I've talked to people before. It's gone like mediumly well. I think. I don't think anyone changed their minds, but I do like a good conflict. So holla at me if you have questions. I will say this though. I don't, because you have ground up and you have top down. Because there's an interesting concept. Pope Benedict, if I remember correctly, he talked about how, because he liked the Latin Mass, it seemed. He wasn't super, he wasn't like trad or anything. He wasn't like, oh, we have to be in Latin and all that stuff, which some of the trads seem to not, they're okay with too. They want reverence, which I appreciate, but they also want other stuff too. But Pope Benedict talked about this thing where he was like, well, if the Mass is going to go backwards, forwards, sideways, whatever it's going to go, it has to be from the people up. And I just don't think that's true. I think things can go that way. But the fact of the matter is the Novus Ordo thing was just like thrust top down. And just as quickly, a pope could change all of that because he's the boss of the church. And then they'll, the traditionalists be like, no, Christ is, Christ is the boss of the church. I know that. But Peter is the steward. It's not like Christ is like in a vestment in Rome right now, dictating. He's given authority to his steward. That's who's the visible boss. Okay. But I don't like that from Pope Benedict because I don't think that's honest or true. It seemed to me he was trying to get out of, because, he did his Summorum Pontificum, he's trying to like nudge in that way. And I think this is always the way with whatever you want to call it, conservatives or right wingers in politics or the church or religion, spirituality, philosophy, everything. It's like always like the side of progress is okay, like just jamming things down people's throats. And then the other side, the conservative side or traditional side is always like, well, we need to have organic synthesis, whatever they're saying. Is like, bro. But I guess you could say the way that the traditionalists didn't like how the Novus Ordo was jammed down their throats, I guess they could be sympathetic to that idea. Like, well, we got to jam down our throats. We don't want to jam down their throats. I don't even care about all that. I'm like a straight up, I don't want to say it. I'm going to say something crazy. I'm just like, you should just do the right thing. Just do it the right thing, the right way. So I'm okay with top down stuff. Obviously, I want top down correct things. That's what I want. Is that so bad? They're like, you're a Nazi. It's like, no, I'm not a Nazi because they did top down stuff that I didn't like. Just top down good things. That's what I want. And I think that's what we should be advocating for. Obviously, this channel is going to be about a lot about the stuff that we can do on the ground level. And my ground level thing here is like, hey, SSPX seeds, people, stop being schismatics. Just be a part of the church. We could use your help in the church. You guys like the Latin Mass, you like reverence. Great. Fight in the church. Don't fight outside the church. That's literally not helping. You're actually making it worse for us. SSPX people are making it worse for people that like the Latin Mass that are in the church. So thank you for that. Not really, thank you. But I know, I guess I deserve it. I'm a sinner. So you are inflicting punishment on me, and I probably could use it. Sanctify me. But yes, so my two main points, it's not really going to be a huge action items, but it's like SSPX seeds, all those schismatics, you're just Protestants. You want to have your own stuff happening. So you're going to make up your own authority, avenues of authority, which is not cool. I'm sympathetic with you guys with the liturgy. Oh, I didn't even get into the dogma and doctrine stuff. So Vatican II didn't really have any, I'm not aware of any infallible statements. I don't think it had any. And it had two dogmatic documents, but there really wasn't anything controversial, I don't think. There was some controversial interpretations of stuff. And then you get like stuff like the religious freedom and the Jews and the Muslims and different things like that. I would say those things are authoritative. And I think this is just basic theological understanding of how the papacy works. The papacy, dang it, now I'm going to get into it. But the papacy doesn't, everything they say is not infallible. It doesn't mean everything that comes out of the Vatican is true, but it is authoritative. And what do I mean? Like an example of that, what should I even use here? I don't know a good example right now. But pick an encyclical like Laudato Si that a lot of people don't like. It's not necessarily saying like everything in there is nothing in there as far as I'm concerned is infallible, because an infallible statement is a very specific thing. It's not only twice in the church's history for sure. People always say this trope. It's like the infallible statement has only been used twice. That is not true. It's been used a lot. Some theologians even argue that an anathema is an infallible statement, which I would agree with. So there's been a lot in the church's history, and it's usually and it says in Vatican I, you can read it, but it usually requires the Pope to say like this is required belief for the church, for the people, something along those lines. I'll find an example of it that John Paul II did one when he said that only men could be priests. He made an infallible statement. It was in an encyclical. I can't remember the name. I'm getting a little out of control, but whatever comes out of the Vatican is authoritative. It means that we should obey it. Obviously, if it was commanding something that was, the regular stuff. Which is interesting. I never hear people, and maybe this is an argument they have, I never hear the SSPX say, maybe they do say this, that they use like the example of sinfulness. They'll use the example of crisis a lot, which is, maybe they should change that if they want to be more convincing. They're like, oh, the church is in a crisis. So when it's in a crisis, we have to do emergency measures that are completely disobedient to the Pope, which I just don't buy. But maybe they should try to do this where they say like, I don't know, Vatican II is like commanding, I don't know, that would be tough to argue. Commanding sin. So if something's commanding sin, we have to disobey. Maybe I shouldn't give them those ideas. They already know about it. They've already thought of that. Come on. They already thought about that. But yeah, when like the Pope or laicizes a priest, does that mean the priest was guilty of the thing he's being laicized for? No. But it does mean he's laicized because the church does have authority to do that. Hopefully that's a good example, and there's other examples. Let me think of another example really quickly before I leave you. Oh, I forgot the document name, but when it says, the Muslims worship the same God, that is authoritative. So we should take that. We're not taking that, with the full obedience of faith, but you should obey it and be like, yeah, that is true as far as I know. If you're a theologian or you know a lot about stuff, you can probably submit a dubia to the Vatican protesting against that, or maybe saying that there's something incorrect in that. But until then, that's authoritative, and we should accept that. I don't think it wasn't I can't remember the exact statement, but it wasn't an infallible statement. So it doesn't mean it's absolutely true. In the future, they might substantiate it with an infallible statement. But until then, until they go the one way or the other, I'm going to believe, yeah, they worship the same God in a untruthful, imperfect way. So hopefully that's a good example. So yeah, when the Pope makes a new missal, it doesn't mean I don't even know how that would make sense. It's an infallible missal. You have to be obedient to it. If the Pope says you have to celebrate using the Novus Ordo Missal, you celebrate using the Novus Ordo Missal. And I'm not aware of anything fundamentally sinful in the Novus Ordo Missal. So if that became a point, which I hope it never does, but if that became a point, I would say we have to have a new conversation. And I do want to mention how much abuse is done on the other side, the progressive side, which never gets talked about because that's just how it goes. The conservatives are always cowards. The progressives are always, whatever you want to call it, courageous or just very bold, where, they'll do whatever they want. They don't care. They'll excommunication, whatever. And there are and were excommunications of very progressive people. I know in my diocese, our bishop, or our last bishop, he did excommunicate people that were very, very progressive. So it does happen. The media is run by, specific people. The media is mostly run by the Jews in this country. So the Jews have a specific plan for the Catholic Church in America and around the world. They've never, for obvious reasons, they've never liked us, and they want to see the church weak. And that's something we have to remember. Oh my goodness, I've been talking for a long time. I know I just said that. It's true. to a large extent. It's not like they're all powerful, but they do control a lot of the media in America. They've been developing it for some time. So yeah, when you hear that stuff from the media, it's like, of course, it's going to be that way. And the conservatives, because I'm saying we now as if I'm in it. I guess I am in it. But conservatives, I don't like the word conservative. If you're just a true Catholic, you're going to be persecuted. Our Lord promised that. I was just talking to my family. It's like Socrates and Plato promised that if you're a just person, you will be persecuted. So we shouldn't be surprised by it. But we got to stick to our guns and be bold, and not foolish in a worldly way, and not reckless. But we need to be bold. We need to be truth tellers. We need to be brave. All right. Well, I already talked about the main thing I want to talk about. So hopefully that was kind of a rambling. This is Fun Friday, so it's supposed to be fun. Hopefully that was fun for you. Please like, subscribe, comment. I'm waiting for the comments. I want some comments. I talk about controversial things, I think. Maybe I got to reach into my bag of tricks with some more controversy to get some comments. But yeah, just let a brother know how you feel. And yeah, have a blessed weekend. Hopefully you're enjoying the octave, and I will see you on the next stream. And if you know how to do lighting, let me know, and I'll see you on the next stream. God bless you, and God be with you.